So as I said in my previous video on today's live session, what I'm gonna do with this video is gonna be a backtesting session considering the price action that we had on NQ during last Friday session, August 15th, during yesterday's session on August 18th, and during today's session. So what I'm gonna do at this point is just start by taking a look at the higher time frame, how price was developing up to that point right before the start of last Friday's session, and we're gonna go from there using the replay tool here on TradingView. So I'm gonna just make the 1 hour chart a little bit bigger here so that we can take a look at where we are. And basically from this point onwards, we had a bullish move. We had some bearishness that came here into the market. This was kind of a 2-day flush that we had. And then from there, we had the continuation to the upside. So from there, we had basically some sort of accumulation around this point. Then we had a move and momentum MB, MB1 validated, that kind of failed here. We kind of continued making bullish moves, and out of this point here, we had price kind of building a stage 1. And as soon as price came out of that stage 1, came into a new bullish momentum here. So at that point, we can label this here as an accumulation MB at that time, which went into this momentum MB move. We could sort of say that around this area we had a momentum MB1 that came and flushed up onto the rising 10 MA, and then MMB1 was validated here. We expected an MMB2, but as price came down, falling and crossing the EMAs, we saw some sort of failure. We had a consolidation around this area, stage 1 getting into stage 2 to the downside here. So this was the first time that we had at this point some sort of distribution here to the downside. So due to the fact that we saw basically from the daily, and in this case the hourly as well, price having this continued move to the upside, maybe not specifically here on the hourly, but on the daily we had basically price running towards new highs, and we at some point expected or saw that the price was sort of extended. So there was sort of an idea that we could start seeing some bearishness building up at some time. In this case, this was distribution here, but instead of price keeping or going down and building a bearish momentum, price came once again above the EMAs, and then we had this weekly price action throughout this time here. So as we were approaching the new session here, basically on this day we had basically this was on Thursday, we had price basically going up and down the EMAs, which at that time was going sideways. So there was this was a difficult, I would say, price action to consider at that time, due to the fact that we had no true momentum out of these areas. We had basically price consolidating in between the EMAs, which truly at this time were kind of the same line. They were practically coming together all here throughout the session on that Thursday. So price kept on going above and below the EMAs, and then during the overnight session, we saw price once again come above the EMAs and then coming back below the EMAs. So at that point, it was kind of hard to get a clear bias on what to expect. So basically, out of the start of that session, we should basically wait to see what was going to happen, if there was if we were gonna have some true definition of price going either to the upside or the downside here, or if this was gonna just keep on basically going around the EMAs on the hourly, in which case that would be basically an indication for us to stay out of that market due to the choppiness that would come as a result. So at this point here, if we just make an assumption on what to expect based on the higher time frame, and just let's take a quick look here on the daily. This is what I meant when I said that there had been a momentum cycle here building through an accumulation, MMB1, MMB2 all around this area, maybe MMB3 around here, MMB4 around this area, and then we had some kind of reset because we had through this 2-day candle a close below the EMAs, but no true reset, I would say, and I moved down through a consolidation, a stage 1, and I built up for a new momentum to the upside. So for me, this was kind of extended, and that's what I meant just a few moments before when I said that for me this could be somehow understood as an extended market, and that somehow a bearish momentum could start developing. Does that mean that we start looking for sales right away? Of course not, because we have to follow our system, and basically there has to be alignment on our EVCC timeframes. But in this case, this is something that we must be aware that could certainly at some point happen. So going back to the hourly here, this is where we were right before the start of the session that Friday. And at this point, I would say we have to wait just to be completely certain, or more certain. If we flip this one here, this was kind of a distribution MB that was validated. So if this is what we were basically expecting to be the start of a new bearish cycle, but in this case came once again below the EMAs, and basically priced again stayed all through this stage 1, a big stage 1 actually. So for me, just to have an understanding of some sort of game plan for that day, I would mark these 2 areas here, and basically and hopefully wait for price to either go and have a candle close on the hourly, either in this case above this high here, confirming that maybe we could get a continuation to the upside, or either a close to the downside. So that's basically what we should be looking into right at the start of the session. Now just let's go and see all the other time frames that we use. So this is basically the hourly, our C2 time frame. And if we take a look here on our context time frame, which is basically the 10-minute, this is basically the range again that we have, basically coming from the hourly. This was overnight session, so we had the buildup of some bullish cycle. So we had kind of an accumulation here into an MMB1 and MMB2, and then we had a failure, price coming back below the EMAs, and then basically right again before the start of the session, we had price coming back below the EMAs. So same as on the hourly, price was kind of making a stage one here, so it was kind of difficult to see what the intention was gonna be, if price would basically break this low here for a continuation to the downside, or this high here for a continuation to the upside. So these are two areas that we could also somehow consider, but it would be best actually to see a move above or below the high and low that we just placed on the hourly. So I'm just gonna at this point play price to see how it went, and we're gonna start discussing it from there. So all of this action is around half an hour before the start of the session. So it's about 10 minutes before the start of the session. This is what I mean, that even on the validation, we had all this kind of back and forth moves. So it's basically an indication for us just to stay out and wait for clear price action before following for a possible entry. So we're getting near the start of the session, 5 minutes to the start of the session. And at this point, I believe, yeah, we're 1 minute before the start of the session, where we get some sort of push to the downside here. So we had this 10-minute candle, which was our C time frame. This could give us some idea, if market keeps on pushing to the downside, that bearishness would come in. But again, at this point, at just 10 minutes into the session, and due to this action here on the context time frame, I personally would wait for further confirmation to see if this kind of momentum that we are starting to see on the 1 minute is going to sustain to the downside, or if this is just going to fail, and once again we're going to have price go above the EMAs and kind of chop there. So we're going to keep on playing this one here. So at this point, we kind of see some sustained move to the downside. We are getting here to this point that we mentioned earlier, where we wanted to see the hourly and have an hourly candle close below this low here for additional confirmation of a possible continuation to the downside. And we had basically no, we are waiting for this candle to close on the hourly. So let's just wait to see if we are going to see continuation of, or if there's going to be a bounce here. And at this point, I would say, just to be fair, I was just considering that due to the fact that we had here basically price pushing here and having price below the EMAs that we previously had this distribution. I'm gonna just flip the charts for clarity here. If we take a look at this, let's see, on the hourly, we had a distribution MB that came back here. The EMAs, I mean, came back. So this was some sort, again, of stage one buildup around all this area. So at this point, the label here for a distribution NB would be moved up to this high, which is basically the high that we placed here earlier and said that we wanted to see a move above that level. So taking that into consideration, we should, in the best scenario, wait to see a candle close above. But as we are seeing this a strong momentum to the downside, we could somehow start following this price action, as there is certainly some sort of alignment here with price pushing, in this case, above the EMAs here on the context time frame. And then here we had again some sort of reaction to the downside out of what I would label here again as a distribution MB into what could be a possible MMB1 on the context time frame. And on our validation, this is basically where we saw the start of the session. So out of all this area and all this chop here, right before the, basically 1 hour before the start of the session, we could as well somehow, just let's take it where I had the label here. We could somehow label this one here with this high and all this area as accumulation. So I'm gonna label as a consolidation. So I'm gonna label this one here again as a distribution MB that went actually into, I'm gonna just put this here. This one went here up to an MMB1. Maybe here, yes, I could somehow say it's an MMB2. And we are right there, kind of building a we're having a flush here that could be somehow part of an MMB3. So just to be clear, the best case scenario would be to wait for this hourly to close above this high here to start looking into sales. But due to the fact that we are seeing a sustained bearish move, I'm gonna, let's say, risk it, and that we're seeing the buildup of bearish momentum on our validation time frame, and that there's also alignment here on our context. I'm gonna just allow it to or allow me to look for possible entries here on the entry time frame as part of this move. So having said that, when we had this flush here coming from this high, we are approaching the 10 EMA. So let's just draw a containment line here. And let's just keep on playing this to see if price gets to touch the 10 EMA. So actually it does here, but after having the move developed, so it is kind of a hard move to catch. And in terms of entry, it was again difficult. or I would say not possible to entry as we had if we considered, yeah, I would say this as MMB1. There was never here a pause to get into a double MB entry. So this was certainly a move out of this flush here, but no entry possible to take at that point. So let's just keep on playing that and take a look at what happens after that. So here we had some move or some reaction out of the 10 EMA, but after that we had a new flush here. So this could be somehow be part of the same MMB. So we could very well look into a possible entry out of a flush or maybe a deeper flush here. So as price comes from this high through all this area here, this would be the containment line. Price came to the 10 EMA and now he's having this reaction. Let's see if there would be some sort of MMB buildup. So this one here is a double MB out of this and out of this. But due to my liking, this is not a buy stop. In this case, this is not a sell stop that I would place, due to the fact that I see a strong move here on the entry time frame to the upside and going actually below the EMAs. And on the other side, I still see room enough for this flush to come here to the 20. So due to those reasons, in conjunction, I would wait for a new setup that would come out of a deeper flush here. So let's keep on waiting. Actually, this would never have tapped us in, and as price came below this low, we just at this time have to adjust the containment line. So here price is coming below the 10, but still not below the 10 EMA, but still not touching the 20 on the entry time frame. So at this time, we once again are getting a double MB build up here. So maybe we could say maybe through this MMB1 into this MMB2 at this time. So if we from this area we start seeing the price coming here to the downside, just to go through this point here, this could maybe be an opportunity. But now we see that we once again see price continue to the upside. So we once again have to adjust the containment line here. And at this point, we're getting price very close to the 20 EMA. So let's just see if there's something that could be built out of this. Okay. So at this point here, we have an MMB1 coming from here. And we are building an MMB2 out of this move here. So we should wait to see if there's some sort of opportunity here out of a double MB entry. So this is still valid here. This would be the double MB. So let's say if we get here, this would be a short position out of this. And in terms of our risk, let's take a look at this one here. So at this time we could consider this entry setup. In this case, our stop loss is at this point just below the MB2 and below the EMAs here. So let's just wait. That would have been a tap in. So let's take a look at how that one would have played out. Normally we go for a 1 to 3. So this would have been the entry. So let's take a look at how that one would develop, and based on our rules in terms to go to break even. So at this point we're gonna play price. So now we have a move below our entry point. Let's see, this is still not 50%. So this is the rule that we have, that whenever we have a move that goes over the 50% of our drawdown, if we ever get again to entry point, we will close that as a break even. But at this point, the trade is still at full risk. Okay, now with this move here, this is certainly, I'm gonna just draw this using this tool here. So from this point, which is the entry to this area here, I'm gonna use this tool. I'm gonna just, for clarity, just remove this and just leave it to see the 50%. This candle touches, goes above or over a 50% drawdown. So at this time, at this point here, we close that trade as a break even. So that one would have been our first trade that went around 0.78 R in profit, and then was closed as a break even trade, basically following our rules. So I'm gonna just write this one down so that we can start taking account of what was available for us during that session. So this was just to be clear, this is gonna be August 15th, and this was the first trade, which was a break even. Okay, so let's keep on looking what happened after that. So basically price kept on around this area, chopping, came here, it would not have or it never tapped our stop loss, and then kind of went into our expected direction. But again, this is basically following our rules, and for my system this was a break even, so I was not interested to keep inside this trade after basically having this rule completed here. So let's keep on looking at that. It's also good to note here as we speak on the 1 hour time frame. Remember that we were expecting to see a candle close above this high, and this is something that has not still completed. So on the first candle here, the hourly candle after market open, this one closed below that high. So we are still waiting for a validation of this distribution MB on the hourly. So just to have that into consideration. So let's just keep playing price from this point onward to see what happens here, if we get a validation of MMB3 or not. So at this time we see that price came here, did not validate MMB3, and basically comes here below the EMAs, and now the EMAs are pointing downwards on the validation. So we stay out at this point, and if we see here on the context time frame, we see price coming up to this high here, which we could at this point label as a possible MMB1. And now price can somehow get a reaction and a build up here of or we could start seeing here some sort of stage one and some sort of distribution out of this area into a continuation to the downside, or we could see price continuing this flush through this bullish move to test on the 10 or the 20 EMA. So we have to see what happens there. For our bias at this point, which is bearish, we have to wait, in this case on our validation time frame, for the moment when price comes once again above the EMAs after having a distribution MBE confirmed. So let's play price and see how it moves from here. So price keeps on going up to the upside. Then we get at this point to the 10 EMA. Let's see if there's some sort of reaction from there. Some sort of stage one build-up. So it seems we're still going to the upside. We get and have a touch of the 20 here on the context time frame. So let's see if this is gonna be time for a consolidation of price into a new or into a distribution and a new bearish buildup, or if this is gonna completely fail. So continuing kind of the chop that we have seen and we have discussed earlier on the 1 hour time frame. So let's play price and see what happens. At this point, we are basically 1 hour into the session, and we had basically one trade, which ended up being a break even. So this is again a lot of chop here. We kind of see price staying inside this area. So this is much of a long-term consolidation here. No true move to the in this case above the EMAs, away from the EMAs, and a comeback to the EMAs. So basically price is kind of staying inside the range, inside this range, and basically all the EMAs kind of very close to price. So this is no good price action to follow. So at this point we kind of start seeing maybe I would say maybe we could consider this as an MMB1. I'm gonna label this one here as an MMB, as a possible MMB1 on the validation coming from this distribution MB, which basically comes from all of this stage one throughout all this area here. So we wait, and as soon as we see price come above all that distribution MB, we start following that, and now we're gonna see how this price action develops. If we get a flush here, a smooth nice flush into the EMAs or not. So let's go and see. At this point we still are missing a touch of the 10. Maybe here we could start considering a touch, but no true flush actually that we could follow. So nothing there. We should wait either for a continuation to the downside and a new flush, or price basically flushing here deeper into the 20. So let's continue watching. So again, Nothing, uh, nothing there still. No validation of this MMB1 that we have labeled here. So now let's see if this flushes deeper. So no, it still touches the price is surfing here the 10 EMA, but without without true move here. So basically consolidating. So again, this is part of all this same chop here. So this is not good price action to follow. So let's just play price and see how it goes from there. And I would say let's wait to see if we truly see a candle close above this this high here for a validation of this distribution MB. So we are not there yet. We're still around all this area. So all this price action here, this here did not give us any possible entries. This was a lot of back and forth price with no true flush to follow. And then we had a new move here that you could, well, somehow say this is a possible MMB2. And now we take a look at that flush there. Let's take a look. We played that quickly. So let's see if there could have been something there throughout a flush here. So we had this move. Price came here right above the 20 EMA. And then we had kind of maybe here a double MB, but then price came below the EMA. So at this point, and due to all that we have discussed so far on the way price action has presented so far, I would not consider this for an entry. And after that, we saw price starting to fail here on the validation, so getting candle closest below the EMA. So we have to wait to see if there's gonna be here again some time of price flushing through the EMAs. So that's what's happening once again. So we are not getting this distribution MV validated still. So at this point, and based on our initial talk, basically at the start of our analysis, I would say I need to see a candle close here on the hourly above the EMA just to start following this one. And this is maybe happening here. Let's see. So once again, we had this candle. We saw that one building that was gonna be above for validating this MMB, and now just around 15 minutes before that hour close, that hourly candle close, price is once again closing below this high here. So the distribution MMB is still not validated yet. So just let's play to see if that one truly happens. So that was the close. Let's take a look here on the hourly. So it seems here that this candle barely closed above. So this could technically be considered a validation of this distribution MB. So let's see how this one actually develops, and if we start seeing actually from this point onwards sellers coming in. So if we take a look here on the context time frame, we had basically, or we are, I believe, still waiting for a validation. I'm gonna just remove this line here. I'm gonna just place this one here just to make it easier to follow. we should wait to see if there's going to be a validation of this MMB1 on our context time frame. But at this point, as we are getting some reaction from here, let's see if there's something that could be built out of this area here into a new bearish momentum cycle. So let's again play price and see how that is gonna develop. So MMB1 on the context is still not validated. Price comes under the EMAs at this point, flushes down. So this could be a flush into the EMAs for a new consolidation into a bearish move. So let's wait to see if that's something that could occur or not. So long-term consolidation here. So at this point, we had very similar to the previous case on the C2 time frame. On our C time frame, we had this candle close, barely closing above this high. So again, technically, is validating this MMB. And now we're seeing a flush occurring on the context time frame. So we could see some deeper flush here into the 20 before we can see a new move into the downside or a reaction from this area here, but we have to wait basically to see price giving us some clear indication of what it wants to do. In this case, price comes as we were expecting here to the 20 to test the 20. Now we have to wait to see if there's going to be a buildup here, or if instead if it's going to still go for a deeper flush here on the C2 time frame. So at this point, we are getting some sort of reaction out of the 20, and basically what we could label here on our validation time frame, given the area where we are and the reaction we're starting to see, is that this here could be considered a distribution MB, validated through this candle. Now we have to see if the move to the downside, to the bearish side, is sustained. So let's wait to see if this move of price away from the EMA will create a flush down at least into the 20 for a proper follow-up of the move. So let's come here and watch that play. So there's still no touch of the 20. Now we have a touch of the 20 there. Let's build a containment line. So this would have been the containment line at that time. And now we have to wait to see if there's going to be some sort of double MB building there. So this could be I'm gonna just draw this here. This would be an MMB1 validated there, and then this is actually an MMB2 that has been built at this point. So let's see if there's gonna be an entry there. In case there is one, let's just place our entry, our buy stop, in case that occurs, and we define the risk there, which should be, let's see, yeah, that's basically the risk that we would define. So we would be protecting the EMAs and basically the whole double MB, and we will be looking into a 1, 2, 3. Normally, I like to have at least a good amount of RR at the validation point of the MMB. So that's why I normally like to have the chance to get involved on a deeper flush, and so that I can have enough room here, at least to the validation of the MMB, to secure some good portion there. In this case, based on the risk defined, that's not a good compromise here, as at this point we would basically just be around 0.4 R. So this is preference. In this case, I'm gonna just run the trade to see how it happens and to take that one into account. But this is just a rule of mine, that basically not a rule, but a preference of mine, and that normally occurs when we have some deeper flushes like this one here. So here, when we get some sort of setup inside these areas, we normally have enough room here till the validation. In this case, there is certainly a flush, so this would be considered at this point an MMB1, but the flush has not been so big, so there was not that big of a move away from the EMAs, and that's the reason why we have in this case this sort of setup. So now let's see if that one gets if that trade is activated or not. So at this point we are still waiting. We now see price going a little bit under the EMAs, so I'm gonna just redraw here MMB2. So this would still be MMB2. So let's see. So we are there about to get tapped in. So once again, why is it that we are gonna consider this trade? We had this distribution MB validated here through this candle close. This one here, MMB1, was kind of validated, and now we had a flush on our context time frame down to the 20 and had a reaction from there, a build up from this point here through this action, through some distribution that was validated, and now that we get this flush here on our validation right into the 20 EMA, and now we get this double MB build up with a buy stop up above the containment line and above rising EMAs. That's the reason why we would consider that trade in case we get a tap in. So that's a tap in. So let's just follow the trade from there. Let's see first if we get to this point here and close above for a validation of MMB1. Okay, we are getting there. We gotta see. So I'm gonna just move this one to the right entry point, which is there. So we went into the trade, had some drawdown, but was well below the 50%. And now price goes above. At this point, I will wait for a price for some retracement and then a move above some high here, or where it develops, just to move the stop to break even. So let's wait to see if that occurs or not. Okay. So at this point here, as we had this retracement and now a candle close above the high, I will be moving right on this candle here, I will be moving the stop loss of this trade from its original position to break even. So that's what I am going to do at this point. And now we're gonna keep on following the trade. So that when it's moving into the direction we expect, we are having price above the rising EMAs on our entry time frame. So at this point we have come up to 1.4R. Now we are having some move below the EMAs, but now we're getting kind of a move above. So price starts to chop a little bit there. So we're certainly still moving up. Let's just so now we have this candle, this strong bullish candle close below the EMAs. So we're getting here, we could say some kind of a part of an MMB2 build up here, and there certainly could be the case that price gets down here to have a flush as part of this one here into the EMA. So that would basically create a break-even trade for us in case we decide to keep the trade going. Or you could also implement a rule that whenever you see, in this case, price building on the entry time frame, some sort of cycle here through an MMB1 into an MMB2 into an MMB3, and now we're kind of getting this one flush, you could take the decision, and maybe on this candle close you could take the decision to close it in this case at 0.75R, or you can just leave it open and see if you can survive, in this case, this if you could survive this flush here on the validation time frame. So for the purpose of this video, we're gonna just let it play and see how that one would go. So let's play this one further. So we are getting here, having a flush on the V to the 10 EMA. And now we're getting a reaction from there. Once again, a flush that is coming near our entry point. And we got tapped out here at break even in a trade that went up to 1.6R and then came back to break even. So once again, it's up to you, the decision that you make at this point after seeing this this run on your entry time frame. So at your discretion, you could maybe close here at 0.75R, or as you see this candle coming down somewhere around these areas, maybe around 1R, and that would be your profit in this case. Or you can just let this one play out, trying to survive this flush here for the continuation to the downside in this case. But in our case particularly, we had this one fail. So we are gonna just count this one as a break-even trade by following our rules. So this is the first trade of the day and ended up being a break-even one. So let's continue watching price and how it will develop from there. At this point, we can consider this as an MMB2, and price is actually right below the 20. Let's see if this fails or if this continues the bearish momentum cycle here. So yeah. So at this point, we are seeing price failing and basically going here below the EMAs on the validation, and on the context is still surfing the 20. Now we had sellers coming in here reacting from this point. So at this area we have to wait and see if there's some sort of, once again, distribution building around this area into a new cycle. So around this point here, at the time price was developing, I would be considering this as a distribution MB. So basically all this price action here, and as soon as we saw price closing above, then we can start following for possible a possible momentum cycle to the downside. However, in this case, price barely moved away from the EMAs and is kind of staying at the same area, so we have to wait further. And now price fails and comes under the EMAs, so for a full failure. So this was no distribution MB that actually validated for the purpose of a new momentum cycle. So I'm just gonna remove this label at this point. And now basically we're seeing price failing, going under the EMAs here on our context time frame. So nothing there. At this point, what we see is a flush here on the C2 time frame that we could consider maybe a flush here from this high up to the EMAs. So we have to wait if there is some sort of buildup of a stage 1 on our C time frame before following that on the lower time frames. So at this moment we are seeing price coming back to the EMAs on the C time frame. So there's just consolidation around all this area here on the context. We gotta wait to see if sellers are truly gonna come and sustain the move. So at this point here, we could say that there was a reaction here out of the 10 EMA on the hourly, which was this area. So this could have been a distribution MB that was validated through this candle here. And as that happens, we can take a look at the validation here, where you had some price going back and forth, And basically from this point here onwards, we saw some move away from the EMAs, and now there's some sort of comeback, but with some weaky price action. So it would be best to wait for further confirmation if this move wants to continue to the downside. So in this case, there is a move that kind of fails here, again due to the price action that we are looking at the moment. Very back and forth, very weaky. So this is not a true MMB1, I would say, to consider. We have to wait for better, clearer price action to consider a buildup of a new momentum MB. And in this case, at this time, we are having price first consolidating around this area. Now we're having price once again failing and going below the EMAs on the context time frame. So at that point, there's nothing there, and we are getting to the end of the session just in 5 minutes. So at this point, we would be just closing the session on that day. So at this point, what I'm gonna do is I am just gonna pause the video, pause the recording, just to go to the start of the session on Monday and then start following from there. So just a quick revision of what we had today. Basically a lot of back and forth action and just 2 entries, both ending up as break-even trades. One, due to our rule of having an over 50% drawdown and price coming back to entry point, so that was a break-even. And the other one is the trade that we had that went, I don't remember at this time how much, 1.4 I believe R, or something like that, and then came back to break even us, giving us the chance based on your management to have closed around 1R or just letting the move develop. And in that case, we got to break even as part of a new flush on a new momentum MB, and we basically did not survive that flush. So that's the reason we had this break even on that day. So basically not a very good price action on that Friday. So now we're gonna go to Monday the 18th to see how it went on that day. So at this time, we are around 30 minutes before the start of the session on Monday the 18th. So we're gonna make basically the same exercise and try to see how price action presented this day, and we're gonna look for any possible opportunities that were basically presented throughout this session on Monday the 18th. So what we saw here, we basically discussed this earlier on the Friday session. We were basically looking for a validation of this distribution NB and a continuation here to the downside. Instead, we had the validation of this distribution NB through this candle, but no follow through here through this high. So instead, we had a flush that came up to the EMAs and a little bit below the 20. This was by the end of the session on Friday, and then during the overnight session we saw price once again coming above the EMAs, and on the context time frame we had the buildup of some sort of new bearish cycle. So we're gonna start labeling those. We could say through this consolidation around this area there was a distribution MB, then into an MMB1 that we are gonna label right here. And then we had a move here throughout the overnight session into an MMB2 at this point here. And from there, we had basically a validation of MMB2 into this, which at that point we would have labeled that as an MMB3, which at the end was not validated, but instead it failed here with some price, some candles below the EMAs. But then it started reclaiming the EMAs and going above them. But at this time, again, around 30 minutes before the start of the session on Monday the 18th, we are having price going once again below the EMAs. So if we take a look at the hourly, we could at this time label this high here as an MMB1, which has not been validated yet. We had a flush here right below the 20s, but immediately we had a move to the upside and above the EMAs, currently rising EMAs. So this is currently an MMB1, which has not been validated yet, but it enables us to look into sales at the moment. On the context, this is just what we have discussed, but at the moment we have price below the EMA, so we have to wait to see how that develops, and we're gonna right now just start playing price and see how that goes right before the start of the session, and see if there was some sort of opportunity there for us during this Monday session. So let's get here. This is basically the price moving right before the start of the session. So we came down here, basically below the EMAs on the context, and then we are having a move once again above the EMAs. We still have an overall bearish bias, so we have to see alignment between our EVCC in order to go to our entry time frame to look for possible setups. So as we get here into the start of the session, we get this strong move to the upside. So this is basically this candle that we see here. And as we are below the EMAs, we have to wait until we get some buildup of stage 1 here into a possible continuation to the downside. So let's wait for that to see if that occurs. So at this point, what we have on our C2 time frame is basically a move from this high up to the 20 EMA. So we could start waiting to see how price develops from this point onwards to see if there's going to be the chance for a new bearish momentum buildup. So we're starting to see some bearish momentum, but still nothing to look for entries. Even though we could say, okay, here's some sort of distribution into an MMB1, but let's remember at this point, all this price action is occurring below the EMAs on our context. So there is no alignment here for us to start looking for entry. So we have to, at this point, wait and keep on the sidelines before we can get a viable move. At this point here, we certainly had a move back again above the EMAs on the context time frame. we are having again a move above the EMAs on the C2 time frame and on rising EMAs. So at this point, there's a possibility to start looking for a sell if we get a move away from the EMAs, such as we are getting here, and a flush. So that would be our confirmation to start looking for a possible entry. So what I'm gonna do at this point is just come here and label this as our distribution MB, which has already been validated through this candle. So now let's just wait to see if there's some sort of flush from this point here. So we're starting to see a pause here and a move back to the EMAs at this point to the 5 EMA. Remember that based on my system, I wait to see a touch at least of the 10 EMA. So let's just wait for that. So we are not getting that at this point. Now we're getting back to the 10 EMA. So let's draw a containment line at this point here. And let's start watching to see if there would be a double MB build up there. So at this point here, out of the touch of the 20, we could say that there is some sort of double MB right here. So I'm gonna just put that there. But at this point, the entry would be still below the EMA, so we have to wait for a clear move above the EMAs, above the containment line, above the containment line to validate that. So let's see if that somehow would occur here. So at this point, we could look at this double MB here. We're gonna modify this a little bit. So at this time, I'm just gonna pass on this one here, as basically the validation of this MMB was through a small move here. So I'm not gonna consider that one. So in this case, maybe that would have worked. We would have been tapped around here, went into drawdown. We'd have to see if that would have been more than 50% drawdown to see if it was a break even or a move. But in my case, again, that was my decision in this case to keep out of the trade because of basically the way that this double MB was formed. It wasn't not enough for me to see basically a good validation of this MMB1 into an MMB2. So that's the reason why I decide to basically pass on this one. So let's keep on watching this one. So in this case, this would have been momentum MB1, and actually what validated here through this candle close. So let's see if this momentum to the downside would continue or not. So at this point, we will be waiting here for a candle close on the hourly above this high, which is basically this red line that I have drawn, to get a validation of this MMB1 on our hourly time frame. And now we are seeing some flush here once again, probably part of this same MMB1. So let's see if that would give us some opportunity, some entry opportunity. So at this point, the containment line would be something like this. Basically, this is the best containment line that we could draw at this time. This would have been a double MB here, but again, as this was below the containment line, we would not have considered that. Now as we get here below this low, we adjust the containment line like this. And now let's see if there's gonna be some sort of build up out of this flush into a possible continuation to the downside based on our overall bearish bias and the alignment that we are having here on our different time frames. So let's wait for that to see if that's something that would happen. And as you can see, this is a failure of that flush here, and we get price below the EMA, so nothing for us to follow at this point. So failure on the 1 minute, and now on the context time frame, we are now having price right below the EMAs. So we're getting price below the EMAs on our context time frame. At this point, we're getting a move here to the 20, to the rising 20 EMA on our C2 time frame. So we have to see if there's gonna be some reaction from this point to the downside, or if this is gonna be some sort of failure that could point out to some possible turning point for price to start showing some bullishness. So we have to wait for that. At this time, we're getting some sort of reaction as sellers coming right from this point. So here we had a move on the validation and price going above the EMAs and coming back to them, but since we are having all this price action basically right at the EMAs on our context, this is basically pointing out to no alignment for us on our EVC, and we basically wait to have more clarity on how the price will be moving, and that's basically a waiting time to see if price goes above or below the EMAs here on the context time frame. So sellers are coming in. So basically, at this time, looking at the context and basically the move that we have been having here, I would wait, or for me, this high here, which I'm gonna draw at this moment, based on this move, would be my distribution MB. This is what I would be following. I'm gonna put a question mark to that label since this is not validated yet. So I'm gonna at this point wait, even though this is a flush, you could argue on the validation, and even though price is here above the EMAs on the C, for me at this time with this price action, it would be relevant to see that price is above the distribution NB, which would happen as soon as we have a 10-minute candle close above this high. So let's wait for that. And in this case, it seems we're having a failure here on the validation with price closing below the EMAs. So nothing there actually to consider. So let's follow that here on our context time frame to see how that develops. And again, if price will still keep on moving with this back and forth behavior, such as has been since right below the start of the session, or if we're going to get some development of clear price action that leads to a new momentum cycle that we can follow. So at this point, we are still below this high here, so no validation on our C2 time frame. We're waiting to see if MMB1 will be validated. And that translates here on our context time frame to basically no price action worth following. So all of this is basically waiting time for us. We're around 1.5 hours into the session and no trades presented, basically due to the fact that all we had here was basically unclarity, uncertainty. So still nothing there. Now we're moving below the EMAs on the context time frame. So we wait. On the context time frame, price came back to the 20 and now it's having some reaction from that point. Now let's see if this bearish momentum would be enough for sellers to step in and finally give us a validation here of this MMB1. So we're kind of 10 minutes, 4 minutes before this candle closes. And just let's take a quick look. So you can see this one closed below the high. So still not validation of this MMB1 on the hourly. Even this distribution MB that we mark here has still not been validated. Now price is on the context once again, moving back to the 20 EMA, and now basically we have a candle close below the EMAs on the context time frame. And on our C2 time frame, we're getting a flush into the 20 EMA, as we can see here. Now we have to see if we are gonna see a buildup of a stage 1 out of this area here. So we can still wait for this to give us some indication if price closes above and validates this distribution MB to follow on the lower time frame, but in the meantime nothing for us. So we're almost 4 hours now. Almost 5 hours. We're 5 hours into the session and still nothing. So basically this, what we see here from the overnight session into the start of the session and all these weeks on the context translate into such a wiki choppy price action that has not led to any entry opportunity as of this time. So as the session continues, we now are getting a move from price on the context time frame into the 20 EMA once more. We are right now around 3 p.m. New York time. And now we are seeing price moving or basically we are at once again the 20. Now we have to see if there's gonna be a move to the bearish side, if sellers coming from this point here, or if buyers are gonna take control and keep on moving price to the upside here, in this case on this chart on the hourly below the EMAs. So let's wait for that. We're getting close to the session on this day. So this is gonna be, I believe, an example of a whole day of price action that led absolutely to no entry at all. So we at this time are getting to the end of the session, and as we can see, there's nothing there for us to take into consideration. So at this time, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move this here, and I'm gonna just place here so this was the 18th. Now we're moving into basically today's price action. So now we are gonna be moving to what was presented today during the session. So probably we're gonna be covering I believe the 2 trades that were recorded during the live session, and then we're gonna keep on following price to see what was available for the rest of the session. So I'm just gonna stop this at this point, and I am just gonna move this quicker so that we can get back to our Tuesday 7 a.m. So this is basically where we were at that point. So basically, making a quick recap, this is the price action we had on Monday. Let's see. Let's go back here. This is what we were just studying, and then we had all this move down to this point. So basically on the context time frame, price not just came here into the 20 but went below it, and basically from there, from this point here around 6 p.m. New York time, we had price starting a new bearish move. So this here was all part of MMB1, which has not been validated yet, and we had a reaction from this point, which was a little bit below the EMAs on the C, and we had the buildup of some bearish momentum cycle here. During the overnight session, we had then some flush at this point here. So once again, we came up to this high but did not validate the MMB and had once again a flush here. Price went below the EMAs, and now as we approach the start of the session, we had a move above the EMAs, then once again below it, and here, due to the fact that we had a reaction from this area and once again are moving above the EMAs on the C, we could somehow consider, I'm gonna just put this label right here, that this high could be considered as a distribution MB, which was validated through this candle at this time around half an hour before the start of the session. So we're gonna be moving from there. I'm gonna just bring here this to have it ready to label on our validation time frame. So let's wait to see how this goes right before the start of the session. So we're around half an hour before New York opens. We are basically around that high here on the C2 time frame. So 15 minutes before the start of the session, we had distribution MB validated, and now that we see this flush here, we can label this one. This is right before the start of New York session. This could be labeled at the moment as MMB1, as we flush here into, at this time, the 10 EMA. So that's why we're getting here this flush. So we're gonna just wait to see if there's gonna be some build up here of a stage one into a bearish momentum that would finally help us close above this high here. So let's play price once again and see how this would start. So we're getting the start of the session, and we're getting basically sellers step in with a strong move here to the downside. We are finally getting above this high here. Now we have obviously to wait if this candle, which would be closing in around half an hour, is gonna close above this high. But at this point, as we had basically this MMB1 being validated, so we're sort of inside a new bearish momentum cycle here on the context time frame, and out of the validation as well, we had certainly inside of here some sort of distribution MB. So I'm gonna just put the label on that high as we had this strong move. Now it's time for us to wait if there's some sort of flush coming in so that we could start following for a possible entry. So let's wait for that. So we see a strong move to the downside there. So price moves away from the EMAs. We're getting still nothing, no pause. Now we're getting a pause there. But again, we wait to see a flush at least to the 10 EMA. So let's wait for that. If that occurs, now that is somehow happening there. So let's draw a containment line. So basically, so as we get here, we are getting to the 20 EMA. And now this is the first time that we get this flush and a buildup of a possible double MB here with a possible tap in, which would be above the containment line and above this EMAs. So we have to see if that would be an entry that we get. So I'm just gonna prepare the entry in case we get that. Let's see the stop loss that we would be using. So the stop loss would be protecting us here. So basically the whole double NB. So this is okay. So let's see if there's some sort of tap in. So at this point, I get a deeper retracement. So I'm gonna just wait. And as we get this candle, this week below this one, it's time for me to adjust the containment line. So this is not valid anymore. So let's wait. So now we are having some reaction out of this point. We are once again we could be building a double MB. We have certainly to wait for price to come above the EMAs. So this is waiting time for us. So let's see here. I believe that at this point I considered this. Let's say double MB, as we have basically price going above the EMAs, and in this case above what would seem to be EMAs starting to point to the upside. So I would place my stop there, and let's see in terms of the yeah, in terms of the stop loss, this is the stop loss I would place or I would use, which would be protecting the double MB and would also be not just at the 20 but very close to it in case price would go here into this area before giving us the move. So let's wait for that. So that would have been a tap in. I believe that was the first trade that I took this morning. So now let's watch how that develops. So it starts making a move in our direction. This goes here around 0.6 R, then comes back. So at this point I was waiting for a flush, and then I move above this high to move to break even, but instead price went below our entry price. So at this point we are still under the 50% drawdown. Now we are over the 50% drawdown. So at this point I moved my stop loss to break even. So in case price came back to entry point, that would be a break even trade for me. But as we were having a strong momentum move here to the upside, and as we have here the 20 right below us, I was actually mentioning that there was a high chance that we would get a stop loss here on this trade. And this is actually what happened. I remember it was kind of a quick move at the moment, but well, here on our replay was basically through the touch of this week on this point. So this one became at that point a -1 trade for us, which was the first trade of the day today. So that was a -1. As that, and I saw that happening, what I did was basically at the same time I drew again this containment line. So now this one even takes into account this high here. So this one kind of gets around this area. And I continued watching price to see if this one was gonna completely fail or if there was gonna be some sort of buildup of a double MB out of this point here. So price stayed around this point here. There was a candle close here below the EMAs. So at this time I was expecting either a full failure or that sellers would immediately come in and reverse the move and get price once again above the EMAs. So we started to see sellers come in. This was still our containment line at that time. So now let's wait and see if price would come. In this case, I would wait to see price to give some sort of tap in around this area to make sure that price would go above the EMAs, and especially the 20 that was starting to point onwards, to correct and start once again to point upwards. So at this time, this is what I see. This is the containment line that we have. And then we had some sort of double MB out of this move, which gets validated. And then we had this double MB here. So I was looking at that time at something like this here, with once again a stop loss around this area, which would be protecting our MMB2 and basically the EMAs here. So that would have been our but that was our stop, and from there we had a new move here to the downside. So our double MV at that point was this one here. We were still waiting for a possible tap in. And at that point there, we got a tap in out of this double MB. So once again, as we can see, at this point, we were above the containment line. We were above already rising MAs here. And even though we had a candle close below the EMAs at this time, we had sellers strongly coming in and pushing price, as we saw here, above the EMAs. And it's very relevant in this case that the tap in that we had was at that time above rising EMAs, not only here on the entry time frame, but also here on the validation time frame. We can see that the tap in was with price above the 20 and right around the 10 and 20 that we see here. So from that point onwards, we see that we went into profit. We're gonna put this at 3 to our full TP. This is basically what we were expecting. So at this retracement and a move above this high, this is when I moved my stop to break even, basically on this candle close, this one here. This is when I moved my stop loss to break even. So I'm gonna just put that label there. And from there, we basically played price. So came here almost to our full TP, made a retracement. All of this price action price was above the EMAs, even the 5. This was the first touch of the 5 that we got. Then we had a flush here, a move below right at this point. So at this time I was also expecting that price could very well flush here, but decided to keep this open to see if the move based on the strong bearish move out of the session would continue that momentum. So basically we let that happen, and at this point here on this candle, this is where we got our take profit. So a 3R that we got at that time. So that was my last trade on the session due to a few things that came up and I had to step away. So now we're gonna keep on watching to see what was available for the rest of the session. This was basically, these two trades occurred here through basically a 15-minute time span after the start of the session. So it's also interesting to note how we have to be aware of where we are and the type of moves that we had. We are coming from a day, so Monday was basically no trades at all throughout all the session. There was no true alignment, and the price action was not giving us any entry opportunities. And now, as we see this move here, just right at the start of the session, there are two opportunities that presented that were based on our system. One that ended up being a loss, a -1, a full valid -1 based on our rules, and then we had the move that we were expecting coming from a deeper flush and a +3 that we were able to catch. So now let's keep on looking at what happens here after this trade completes or gets completed. and how it continues throughout the session. So at this point, let's put a label here as MMB1. So this is the flush that we just traded. And now we are getting this high validated through this close. Now let's see if this is gonna continue or not as part of the start of momentum MB to the downside here. So now we start getting some new flush here. So this one here could be labeled as MMB1 or MMB2. I would say probably MMB2. Now we're getting once again a flush into the 20 EMA. So we're gonna follow this one to see if this could lead to any entry opportunity. So let's place here, this would be the containment line at that point. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So this would be the containment line. So now let's follow this one up to see this flush that's coming into the 20 and see if there's some sort of build up there. We have a candle close below the 20. Now we wait to see if sellers step in or not. Sellers do step in. But as we had, I remember, yeah, as we had two bullish candle closes, two consecutive ones closing below the EMAs, that's when I decided we had to basically step back and wait. And from there, we see basically price staying there, building some sort of stage one, but finally failing. And on the validation, we get below the EMAs. Now on the on our context time frame, we're moving here from this basically cycle, and we're gonna just label this flush here as part of MMB2, and we are getting price basically flushing down through the 5 into the 20, and that's basically where we are. So at this time now we have to wait to see out of here we get a bounce, or if price flushes down to the 20 to build a new stage 1 into stage 2s that would be translated into new momentum MBs to the downside. So at this time, what we see is basically some sort of, I'm going to put the label here. So we get some sort of distribution MB, which comes as a result of a reaction or a bounce from this point here, which is the 10 on the C. And now we get some sort of flush here into the EMAs once again. So let's see if I drew a containment line around here. So we're getting to the EMAs. And now let's see if we build a double MB out of there. So here, what we have for sure is a double MB that we can represent through this. So this is once again a move which validates this double NB, goes away from the EMAs and gets back here to the EMAs as a flush, so this could be at that point considered as an MMB1. And from there, we're gonna draw a possible entry here with a stop. Let's see, around right there, I would say. So that stop would be covering or protecting a hold MB2 and the EMAs here. So let's see if there would be a tap in on that move. So still nothing. And as we get here, so the double MB becomes this one. And as I get once again the EMAs on the E pointing downwards, I will basically wait. So let's see how that goes. Now we get a wick below this one, so we are supposed to adjust the containment line just like this. And now once again wait to see if there's going to be some sort of double MB buildup. So at this point here, we kind of have this as MMB1, and we have this here building at the moment as MMB2. If price comes above the EMAs, and at this time sellers start pushing price higher in this case, this would be a valid point for entry. So let's see if that somehow is gonna get developed. Seems to be happening here. Let's see. Let's see if there's gonna be one more candle to the upside. So nothing there because my buy stop, my sell stop would be probably, I'm gonna just draw that one as well. I would place it here, so I'm not sure if that would have been a tap in or not. The stop would happen around this area here. So let's see how that would go. Still no tap in. So in this case, we did not get a tap in. Basically from there, the movement or the move failed. So this is just to be clear how we would have placed our buy stop just a little bit above the high, and in this case there was no tap in, so this was in this case no trade. And now we are failing here on the validation with 2 consecutive candle closes below the EMA, so let's wait to see what happens. So price reacts from there. So I would say due to the way that this happened, so price stayed a little bit under the EMAs and then basically validated this, I would still consider this as part of the cycle. So no reset here, but instead a continuation to the downside. So let's keep on watching there. So we certainly have a strong move to the downside. Downside sellers are basically having control, as we basically saw all this confirmation on the sellers moving price above this point. So as MMB1 got validated on the C2 time frame, And we are certainly getting a reaction out of this flush on the context time frame that came into the 10, and now is getting close to validate MMB2 on the context. So we could at this point wait for a flush here, which would be MMB2, to get into possible sells. So let's see if that happens. So price gets higher and now starts building a pause. Now see if we move lower, at least into the 20. So nothing yet. So now we're seeing here some sort of flush that comes into the 20. So let's watch that one. So let's draw our containment line around this area here. So that would be our containment line, and we are having price right sitting here on the 10 EMA. So let's wait if there's gonna be some sort of build up there. Okay, so at this point here, we have an entry opportunity through this double MB. This one here, this one here. So we're gonna put our sell stop there and see if there's gonna be some sort of tapping, and in terms of the stop, that would have been placed right there, protecting basically the EMAs and the double M and the MMB2. So let's wait. So price flushes way deeper. So at that time I would cancel that trade and wait a little bit longer. So price moves below this low, so we adjust the containment line just like this, and we wait for a new double MB development. So let's see this. So this one, let's see if we would consider this double MB. This is MMB1 and this one here as MMB2. And in this case, if price would give us a tap in around this area, would be right or barely above the containment line and above rising EMAs in case price reacts right off this. So this would be some sort of valid entry. So let's see if that would develop. So let's place this one here. So just like this, with a stop loss there, which would be basically protecting the whole. Or just let's take a look here. If we put this one right there, this is, well, this could as well be valid, you could say. But due to the fact, I'm not sure. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna just go with this, basically to see if we get a tap in here with the buy stop below just the EMAs. So this is still valid, and that would have been a tap in right there. So in this case, we got a tap in here, which was right above the the containment line, and certainly above rising EMA, so it was valid. We got a tap in, then we saw price basically staying right above entry point, then coming back a little bit under the entry point, and then going above, staying kind of wicking here around entry price, and then at this point we saw a relevant move here to the downside in the direction that we expect. So now let's wait to see how that would have developed. So that one's coming almost to our full TP due to the extension here on this move. At this point, for sure, I would move this to break even. So I'm gonna just place the label there to show that this is a break-even trade at this point. So, and then we just wait to see, and then we finally get to break even right there for a plus 3. So let's write this one. So that would have been our third trade into the session. So just a quick recap, we had basically MMB2 developing from this high here. So at this time, if we take a look at our context, we had this move here, price closed on this candle above this high, so we had MMB2 validated on the context time frame, and after that we had this flush here as part of this bearish cycle here on the validation. So this flush came here down into the 10 EMA and a little bit below. This was a clear containment line, and then we had also a clear double MB with a in this case sell stop that aligned basically to the conditions that we look for, which are basically a tap, a price tap above the containment line. In this case was barely above it, but it was above, and above rising EMA. So we got basically the trade. We had certainly to wait for a little bit of time to see some sort of resolution of price around this area, and then basically it went straight up to our full TP in this case, which was, this is a little bit more, this was around here. So actually on this candle was when we came to the full TP. So that was certainly another opportunity that presented. So here, taking a look at this move, after having basically the validation of MMB2, we came here and made a pause, and price basically came here one time touching the 10. And if we take a look at this flush here, there was this containment line. And maybe here there was some sort of entry, you could say, through this buy stop of this double MB. So this was certainly a valid entry. However, I was at this time expecting maybe a deeper flush here. So this one I'm just not gonna count, but just to be fair, this is a possible trade that would happen at this point. So I'm just gonna draw it for understanding purposes. In this case with this, let's see. So So in this case, we have to go with this stop. So around this area. And let's take just a look at how that would have played out. So that one as well would have been a very nice trade. So certainly at this point, or even this point here, we would have moved that one to break even. And let's see if that one went for a full TP or came back to break even. So that one would have been a full TP. Interesting here just to note how price can move sometimes. The tap in would have been here. We would have a move basically up to 2.5 R. Then we would have come back almost to break even. And then once again, price moved up to 2.6 R and basically came once again down almost for a full comeback to break even. And after that, we had finally the move up to the full 3R TP that we normally consider. So just a quick note on how to anticipate how price could and will move at certain conditions. And in this case, basically, we have to stick to our system, to our rules, and let it basically play. So this one was again a full TP possibility, but we're just not gonna count that, as we didn't actually, or as I would probably have not been engaged in this one, although it was once again fully valid. This was a clean flush, an entry above containment line and rising EMAs, coming from a reaction from the 10 EMA. So it was worth actually putting risk on it. So just a quick note on that one. And so I'm just gonna erase this one, but it's again fully valid. So let's keep on looking. So we had MMB2, we had this move from there, we came here to this point that we just mentioned. For me, this was kind of part of the same MMB2, and then we came up to this high here, which would have been MMB3. At that time, I did not consider that, as I was kind of following the move on the previous trade. But this was again kind of a flush that we were enabled to follow. In this case, we had this containment line, and at this point, the MMB2 buy stop would have been here, which for my taste is kind of high, based on where we are on the move and on the distance that we have till the validation. So normally this kind of setups I tend to avoid, and in this case this one would probably have been closed, I would say, let's see, most probably as a loss, I think. But yeah, this is something that I would not have been engaged to, due to the fact that the MAs, the MMB1 and MMB2 were kind of apart to each other, and this was for me kind of high in the move. So then we had this move here. So this was, I believe, a much more nicer flush, cleaner flush. So from this high through these points here, we came up to the 20, and we had a reaction from there, and we had the build up of a double MB. From this point. So here, once again, we could have something like this. So this would have been a tap in. But yeah, I hesitate and doubt that I would have taken this one similar to the previous case that I discussed. I have the MMBs way too much apart one to each other, and they are very different here, even in terms of sizes. So probably I would have skipped this one, even though this was again a valid trade in terms of the alignment of all time frames. Where it came from, basically a touch of the 20 and a reaction from there, a bounce from there, a clear double MB, price above containment line and above rising EMA, so was fully valid. But in this case, my only concern was that these two double MBs were different again in sizes and apart one to another, but it would have been again a fully valid trade in this case. So actually what we have seen so far is that there was certainly out of this move, of this bearish move, this was basically coming from a clear momentum MB or a momentum cycle that gave actually plenty of opportunity throughout the session, and we have actually just around 1.5 hours or 90 minutes into the session with plenty of opportunity there. So that's again basically important to consider, to say that sometimes when price wants to move in a nice way, we're gonna get several opportunities throughout that period of time. So yeah, in this case, this would have been again a fully valid trade. If we place it here, just to take a look at how that one would have been, this would have been our stop below the EMAs, and the full TP would have been around this area here. Trade would have been placed at break even on this candle close, and from there we had basically price moved, let's see, stopped, let's see, yeah, right into the full TP. So these last two trades that we saw, one coming from this area and the other one coming from this area here, both gave valid entry opportunities, one out of the 10 EMA, the other from the 20. So this is kind of interesting, so for us to note that maybe this is some kind of conception that I have or rule that I have, but not necessarily a full valid one, because here there is certainly two examples that went well. So we have to take a look at other examples through these conditions to see if this is something or some rule that we can kind of modify for future entry opportunities. But this one certainly went once again to a full TP. So just as the other one, as we were not fully convinced, I'm not gonna consider that one either, but I just wanted to point it out that this was a fully valid trade. So at this point we validated MMB3, so we are coming probably to an extended move. Maybe if we get a flush, a clean one, we can get a move to a validation of MMB4, which would be the last one we considered in case it presents. So at that point we would consider the move kind of extended. So let's see how this would have played out. We're getting a flush there. We're flushing into the 10 EMA. So this at this point would have been labeled as MMB4. And the containment line at that point would have been something like this, actually. So we came here. We are actually there because of this low here. And we are kind of building a double MB out of there. Those candles are kind of weaky, but that would be here MMB1, MMB2. Now we see price coming once again back on this low. So let's wait. Now we get a wick below all of these areas here. So we have to adjust the containment line like this. So let's put this there. So that's our containment line. And now we get here an MMB1, and we should then wait to see if there's any sort of MMB2 being built. So this one is a double MB, is a MB2, not a sort of MB that I like. So we're flushing deeper there. I'm gonna adjust once more the containment line, and we're gonna wait to see how it goes from here. So this was our containment line, and now we have once more the buildup of a double MB here. So price stays here for a while inside MMB2, which is right here. So let's just draw this. This would have been MMB1. This would have been MMB2. So maybe a sell stop above this high here. Let's see how that would have looked like. So at that point, our stop would need to be there. So to be honest, this is not a trade I'm particularly interested in. Why not? Because we are already on the kind of end, I would say, on this move, on this bearish momentum. And what I did here is basically based on this risk. If we came here to the validation, we would be around 1.2 R. And at this point, there's a chance that we, well, of course, this can still go to the downside and continue, or just as we are kind of exhausting the move, we could just fail and basically come back to either a break-even trade or just fail from this area. So let's see how that would happen. But due to that maybe I'm not fully comfortable in taking risk on this one. So at this point, we would have got a tap in. This is less than a 50% drawdown, I think. Let's gonna measure this one. So yeah, it's less than 50%. So at this point, we let the trade run. So this is running. Came to this point, still at full risk. Now we are coming back here. This is over 50%. So now we wait either for a full stop or for, in this case, a comeback to break even. So that would have been, and this would have been a stop. So that's why, well, in this case, this again could have worked out pretty well. But my reasoning behind that is what I said before. First, this kind of price action is not the best for me. This is kind of evident through this week's here and through the way that price presented here. And then again, the reasoning behind it, that even though we could have some sort of move in our direction, probably this is somehow extended, and in this case this would have failed without giving us the opportunity to close at break even. So this one would have gone up to 0.6 R and then basically a comeback through entry point directly to stop loss. So this is one that, again, for understanding purposes, I just discussed it, but I would not have taken that, as I said before. And at this point, we are kind of failing here. So this is kind of expected. Let's see if that builds something here or if it just fails at this time. So it seems it's flushing here as part of what we could start labeling as MMB3. So that time that would have been MMB3. We would have gotten here on our context at this time to the 5 EMA. Now we are below the EMAs on the V, and now we have to wait for a build up here of some sort of distribution and then a move once again to the downside and a new build up here of momentum MBs. So let's wait for that to see if that's something that could occur out of this area here, or if there's gonna be some additional flush as part of this inside MMB, of this MMB3 here on the context time frame. So at this point, this is some sort of consolidation around this area. So I'm gonna just label this here, as we had price here come back, then we had a new move here that finally validated. So this high here would have been my distribution MB, and from there we had it validated, and now price started to go to the downside. So now let's wait for basically a flush and a build up out of a possible MMB1. So at this time we get some sort of move, kind of quick, and maybe something a little bit aggressive. Let's pause this. I was looking at this at that time. This was the containment line at that point. So I would be looking for an entry of a double MB here, but that let's see. So at this time, in order to understand some possible entry opportunity, we would... No, there was actually nothing there, I believe. Because all of this was MMB1, and then we had here MMB2 that was never validated and failed. So just if we looked at something like this, maybe then you could argue that there was an entry around here, but the buildup of the double MB was not clean. The clean one would have been around this area, and then we would not have, or the double MB would have been through this here, and there was no buy stop there. So nothing there actually. Nothing clear. The other trade would have been kind of forced, I would say, if we put a sell stop at this point. I would kind of feel that some sort of forced, and actually that would have failed. So then we had this close below once again here, so for me that would have been invalidated at that point. And then price basically failed on the validation. So this kind of MMB was not valid, was, as we saw, price coming below the EMAs. Now let's see how that goes. So a lot of wickiness there. So at this point, we're getting MMB3 validated on the context. With this candle close above this high. And now we are getting here, let's see, a new, yeah, I would say here. Through this high, we had distribution MB that came into this as an MMB1. So let's write it down. And then we had this move here to the upside. So now we gotta wait to see there's gonna be a flush coming from there. So we get to the 5, to the 5. Now we're getting there, we're getting a flush. This would be labeled as MMB2. And this was the flush at that time. So we're now just below the 10. Let's see if there would be some buildup of a double MB that would be clear enough to take some sort of entry. So at this time we had this containment line, we had price coming here, right below the 10, and then kind of sellers coming in and kind of reclaiming this 10 EMA. and we had this double MB. So from here and here, so these could somehow be a valid sell stop. So let's see if that gets a tap in. That would have tapped us in there. Okay. So this would have ended up being a break-even trade. We got in. We got this move to this point up to around 0.5R. Then we got here in drawdown over 50% and then came back to break even. So this one ended up being a break-even trade. So this is why it's important to not just consider the entry point and all this, but also the placement of the stop. So in this case, we were able to basically break even due to the fact that this stop was protecting the whole double MB here. And this can be somehow more relevant when we are taking a trade out of a 10 EMA more than when we take them out of a 20, when the move, if it's gonna work, probably it's gonna react from there. But when we take a trade here from the 10, well, there's always a chance that price wants to flush a little bit deeper. So in this case, this was in our favor and we ended up with a break even at that point. So that was another trade we took, or we would have taken certainly, for a break even. So let's see how that goes from there. So it fails. Once again, comes to the 20. So we could somehow argue that there was this maybe containment line there, but for my taste, this would be kind of very high here on the move. If we get, let's just play price and see how it goes from there. So let's see, we get here to the 20, moved below the 20, reclaimed the 20. So basically we had to wait here for a pause for a double MB. This would kind of be maybe the ideal entry, but at this point we were below the containment line, so that was a no entry for us. So let's see how that one would go. This would be the buy stop that we would consider. But again, I'm not a big fan of this entry due to the fact that it's kind of very high to my taste here on the move, coming from the reaction and the area where we had the reaction. So that's not something that I would consider. So that one would have been here a tap in, then a move. And as we had this move, this would have been a break-even trade. And at this point, this one seems to be working. Let's see if that would somehow play out. Just again, just for study purposes, nothing that I would have taken. This would have been the entry. And yeah, one of the reasons is that I do not have a clear basically stop. I normally like to place my stop, let's say here, protecting this EMAs, and this is for me a way too big of a stop. You could also take a little bit more of risk and just protect, in this case, the EMA. And maybe in this case it would have worked out, I'm not sure, but let's see. At this point we had price moving, here was a break even, and it finally came back to break even at this point. Well, not yet, let's see if it does. No. Oh. It's kind of playing with us a lot. Yeah, it would have, if we would have sustained through all this move, this would have been a full 3R TP. So price would have tapped us in here, moved up to this area, coming back almost to break even, but as it did not just fully come back to this point, we would still be in the trade. Once again, almost to full TP, a new flush, and then basically coming up to full TP. So once again, this sort of moves that I am not fully comfortable yet, as they are kind of high again in the move already happening. So I usually have the tendency to expect a flush here at some point that would tap me out, that would take me out at a full stop. So that's why I normally avoid those. But in terms of the setup, the double MB, the location, the alignment, it's clear and it's valid. And in this case, it would have worked, even though I'm not sure if playing this live, I'm inclined that I would have closed earlier here at some point. But well, again, it's important to see how price plays, and sometimes it gives the moves and the full profit, even though the conditions are not basically what we are expecting or anticipating in our minds. So certainly there was something there. This one validated MMB2, so MB2 on this cycle was validated, and now we are kind of building or going into the momentum MB, in this case above MMB2. So now we have to wait to see if there's gonna be a new flush developing, coming into the EMAs. So there's a surf on the price surfing the 20, and then some flush here, a candle close on the validation, some sort of flush from here throughout all these candles, and then let's just watch this one. This is an interesting example. We came up to this point. So at this point, we had an MMB1 here. And then we had this MMB2. Basically through these two candles. Let's just draw that MB. So this would have been a buy stop. Honestly, for me, probably this would not have been enough in terms of the location of the 20 EMA. I normally would wait for this to tap me in a little bit higher here above the EMAs. So in this case, this one again seems to work, and actually very nicely, but again, due to my rules, I am positive that I would have probably kept myself out of this one due to this, basically due to the fact that we were here below, and just let's see, the tap-in actually would have been right here, so just coming back a little bit over the EMA at that point. So normally when I see these moves and I get a candle close below the EMAs, I normally, if we see in this case sellers coming in, I wait for a tap in a little bit above at least the 20, and in best case scenarios above the 10 as well, or at least right around the 10. But in this case, as I was just a little bit, I would say, at the 20 or barely above it, this is another reason why probably I would have skipped this one. But this one actually played again very nice. So this would have been the entry, and basically here the stop would have been at this point, and this one would have probably played out nicely. Yeah, this again around this area, this would have been a break-even trade, and let's watch it. So in this case, this one would have ended up as a break-even after almost reaching the 3R. It came up to 2.75 and then came its way all the way back to entry point. Okay. So let's see where we are. We actually validated MMB2. So then I would say this was the MMB3 on that move. And then we had basically this move here, which was kind of MMB3, MMB4, but that actually is failing. So let's watch it. We're getting below the EMAs. We're getting here kind of, this is a buildup of MMB4 on the context time frame. So we're getting the flush on the context to the 10 at this point. So some consolidation around this area here. Continuing, price continuing here to the downside. And then we had a bounce out of this area on the context and a move above and away from the EMA. So let's see if we get some nice flush there, which would be in this case an MMB1. So we are still, at this time we were still above the 20, now we above the 5, now we get a flush down through the 10 and right now at the 20. Let's draw the containment line. So now we have all these candles below the EMA, so we're not just gonna consider this one anymore. Yeah, so here this is kind of a difficult price action to follow. when we saw at first we were considering this and this one as a possible MMB2 that failed, went below the EMAs. Now inside of this area there's probably a distribution. Then we had price coming above the EMAs. We had kind of a pause here as MMB1, but no clear flush, I would say. This was around this area here. Yeah, from this point downwards here. And basically a flush just through one candle. So maybe there was something here, but no, I probably would say it's hard to follow. Then we came up to this point, we had a new flush here, but again the price action is kind of pretty weaky. So again distribution MMB1. Now here again MMB2 just through the flush of one candle that came from the high up to the 20. So there was some sort of flush around here, and maybe this was the buildup of a double MB. So yeah, there was some entry around here, but normally this sort of moves when I have a flush just through one candle. That's something that I usually avoid. So we had again distribution into MMB1, into MMB2, and now we are getting a kind of a new flush here into the 20 once again. Kind of hard to follow, I would say. This would be sort of the containment line from this point through this point here. And there, yeah, there was some trade heat there, I would say. So plenty of opportunities actually through all this session. Some through setups that I can be inclined to avoid, as we have mentioned throughout all this recording, but well, it's interesting just to see how on a day where price just moves throughout the day in accordance to the overall bias that it is presenting, then there's a higher chance that we can get more opportunities. So in this case, this one was a fully valid setup, I would say. So this was kind of wiki, I would say. Let's here label this. So out of here there was some sort of distribution MB. Into an MB1 here. Then this was all MMB1 into MMB2, I would say. So there was certainly an opportunity here, as we mentioned earlier, just through this candle close and maybe here. And now on MMB2 or MMB3, you could say, once again we had this flush and we had a double MB, a clear double MB, with our conditions met of price tapping us in above the containment line and above rising EMAs. So let's just consider this one. Let's see where we have put our buy stop, our stop loss. Here's a 2R. Here is at 1. So this would be 1R, and here we would be covering the whole. So I would probably be placing this one at 2 contracts here, just protecting the double MB and the EMAs, the whole EMAs here. So here we had price tapping us in. So let's see how this goes from there. Here we went up to to R and came back to break even, as we had no chance before to break even. So this is still at this point at full risk. So I would say until now that we have this candle close above this high, this is the point where I would, through this candle close, yeah, let's see, through this candle close, yeah, I would put the stop loss to break even. So I'm gonna just label this one, stop loss to break even, and then let's play the rest from there. And that one came back to break even, so came up to 2.1 R and came back to break even. So let's write it down. Let's write it down here. So this is a break even. And let's write it down also here, a new break even. And we're coming close to the end of the session, but let's play price once more. So we fail on the validation. Let's remember that we basically came here to validate MMB4, or we're validating an MB4 as of now through this candle here. So this is kind of extended at this point on the context time frame. We would probably wait for a reset here at some point. So we had a reaction from this area here, which is the 5 on the context, and then a move that actually is validating an MMB4. So we're getting here a move back to the EMAs, but due to the fact of where we are in the move, I would not be following this. And we also can see that there is pretty much weakness here on the validation time frame. So it gets complicated to kind of find a good containment line. And then we finally fail here on the validation. Price comes below the EMAs, and on the V we have price basically flushing into the EMAs. Now we once again get some sort of distribution MB here into a move away from the EMAs, but no true flush. Maybe there. So here we are kind of building something, but again, as we have already validated this, so basically due to the point of where we are here on the context, I would expect some sort of failure here. So that's why I probably would not be following this price action at this point. And that one fails as we expected. And now we came to the end of the session. Basically on that day we are around 4 p.m. New York. So we're gonna stop here. It's been a long video, 3-hour video, basically covering the price action from Friday until today. So the full 3-day price action, and through all these days we had basically Friday with basically back and forth price action and just 2 trades with break-even result, a Monday with no trades at all, basically price action again moving back and forth, and actually no trade opportunities were presented. And today's price action, in contrast, gave us plenty of opportunities. I just counted here what I probably would have taken. The first 2 trades were actually trades that I took during the live session, and the other 3 were based on the price action that we just studied. But as we saw, there were, I believe, 2 or 3 examples of trades that ran up to 3R, but were maybe not completely aligned to my current expectations of how mainly the buy stop on the entry should look like. So in this case, this is something that I'm glad that I recorded, so I can go back and study the moves once again, because there's certainly some opportunities that were there that could be important in days like this, where basically the moves continue and happen, and basically the price action responds well to what is expected on the cycles, on the price, on the momentum price cycles. So just taking into account the trades that we took, this would have been, let's see, a 5R day for us, just taking into account the trades that we just saw. So that's it for now. Again, it's been a long video, but it was relevant here to see and backtest all the price action on these days. Friday was a day that I did not trade at all. Monday, I believe, just this was a partial session for me. And well, basically today I had just a quick session out of these first 2 trades, but then had to later walk away. So that would be it for now.